Hello, everyone. I want to start out by thanking all our viewers and welcoming you all to Medical Student Grand Rounds. I'm Bryce Ringwald. I'm a fourth-year medical student and Vice President of Student Council. Medical Student Grand Rounds is a lecture series for medical students by medical students. And this series is going to be continuous, occurring the first and third Tuesday of the month, starting from 12 p.m. and will continue via Zoom until we can return to the Miling lecture halls. Today, we have a fantastic presentation lined up for you all with Janice Bonsu, fourth-year medical student who is presenting on the hidden curriculum of leadership and her exciting leadership roles as the executive president of student government affairs at Johns Hopkins University during her undergraduate career and her service as a graduate student trustee on the Ohio State Board of Trustees. On November 17th, we will have Brian Hansen, who is going to be presenting on his research project on cardiac arrhythmias and the future of rhythm mapping. And then on December 1st, we'll be hosting Shan Lansing, who will be presenting on the importance of rural healthcare and her work as a governmental advocate, working with representatives in Washington, D.C. But before we start, we're still in need of medical student speakers for our lecture series, and we ask that you use the QR code found here to nominate a potential speaker. These can be self-nominations, or you can nominate someone else. We want to represent medical students across all classes who are doing amazing things and give them the opportunity to present and inspire their peers. And during this talk, we will be utilizing the Q&A function to gather questions during the presentation. We cannot guarantee that we will get to all the questions, but we will do our best to get to as many of them as possible. And now it is my great pleasure to introduce Dr. Hal Paz, Executive Vice President and Chancellor for Health Affairs, for today's introduction.
Thank you, Bryce. Appreciate the opportunity very much. Good afternoon to all of you, and thank you so very much for inviting me to participate in the inaugural Medical Student Grand Rounds. I'm thrilled to know that this series will become a regular part of the College of Medicine experience, and I want to thank the Student Council for organizing this. And I'm particularly excited to be here today to introduce Janice Bonsu as this series' first featured speaker, so that she can share her experience coalescing medicine and leadership, which is something I've had the privilege of knowing a little bit about during my career. In fact, if it weren't for the programs offered to me early on in my education and training around leadership, frankly, I doubt I'd ever be in the role I'm in today. And it was through the opportunities that the various institutions I had the privilege of spending time at, organizing those programs offered. It's hard to imagine a world that would have turned out the way it has. As a fourth-year student, Janice has proven to be both an excellent medical student and, as you heard, an outstanding leader. Not only has she excelled in her studies, but she's also regarded as a trusted and capable leader by students and faculty alike. In addition to being a second lieutenant in the U.S. Air Force, Janice has served in a number of leadership roles. Her commitment to student leadership began in her undergraduate career, where she was named executive president of the Student Government Association at Johns Hopkins. She continues to carry that same level of commitment here at The Ohio State University, where she serves in roles such as senior advisor to the president of the Interprofessional Council, among others, and where she was appointed by former Ohio Governor John Kasich to serve as graduate student trustee to the Ohio State University Board of Trustees. It was through her position on the board that I first had the pleasure of working with her and witnessed firsthand her passion and commitment to improving health and well-being. She recognizes the role of healthcare professionals in creating healthy communities, which is evident by her focus on community advocacy, as well as her determination to be an example to students, faculty, and staff across the Ohio State campus. During her time at Ohio State, Janice has had a tremendous impact on the university and Central Ohio community, and her many accomplishments no doubt prove that she will continue to make an exceptional physician leader. Therefore, I can think of no better person to provide you with the insight and invaluable guidance on the important relationship between medicine and academic leadership. And with that, it is my great pleasure to turn it over to Janice Bonsu.
Thank you so much, Dr. Paz. I'm not good at hearing these great things about myself, but so eloquently stated. And thank you all for your allowing me the opportunity to share a bit of my story with you guys. As I sat to prepare this talk, I reflected on strong leadership I've been able to witness, such as by Dr. Paz and all the mentors we have on campus, and the qualities that they possess. Before I start, I want to say I'm wearing my sticker. Today is November 3rd. For yourself, for your patients, for your communities, please get out there and vote. Vote for the candidate who will unite us under thoughtful leadership. So today I'll be sharing my talk titled The Hidden Curriculum of Leadership. And it's a narrative into my development of my leadership values. And I hope that you'll reflect on my journey that I share and identify key experiences in your life that may not have been planned, but have developed these critical skills throughout your time. I have no disclosures. So age-old question, right? Are leaders born or made? So research by psychologists has proven that leaders are mostly made. Best estimates show that about 1/3 of leadership is born and 2/3 is made. And that 2/3 is what's in our hands. And behind the scenes in our lives, we've had these opportunities to define our approach to leadership. Hopefully not like this. Traditional leadership glorified the person behind the podium, standing in front of the pack, balking out orders. But more recently, we've been reflecting on the importance of servant leadership, the leader who stands within the crowd, who leads with cooperation, and who empowers others to achieve their goals. So let me discuss what I think are the 4 values of my leadership approach. First has been persistence, right? If at first you don't succeed, try. The community, because we have to do more than belong, we must participate. Purpose, which for me, after reflection, is really just to be useful to others. And service, because by finding our voice, we can help amplify that of others. So I'm going to go over my journey. And as you can see, it's not a straight and narrow path. And although we feel the pressure to do everything perfectly, I know I do, we know that's not reality. This pressure that we feel is totally unfounded. And that's not how my journey has been. And I know I can't see you all, but raise your Zoom hand if your journey has looked a little bit more like this path with twists and turns. And I hope I'm not the only one who's felt like this. But I have found my way, and I'd like to share the roadmap that I followed to lead me here. Let's start with persistence, which is fundamental building block. In the spirit of election day, I also want to start with the story of the first election I ever ran for. This is where I went to high school. I moved into a small town in the middle of the year when everyone had already made their friend group and formed their cliques, and I stood out more than usual because my school wasn't super diverse. I was drawn to student council. I wanted to improve outreach to transfer students and to students of color. And I ran freshman year for student council. My campaign teacher was actually my Spanish teacher, Senora Cribda, so shout out to her. But I lost that election, big time. Sophomore year came around, I reassembled and I ran again, hoping for a different outcome. And I didn't find it. I lost again. And that was really defeating because at the time, I felt like a complete failure, and it was hard for me to decide whether or not I should just find another activity or to run again. But junior year came and I re-strategized, talked with my mom for encouragement, and I ran again. And I lost again, 4th time, 3rd time. But let me remind you, 16 is a tough age to feel rejected. And tears fell each time, and I felt like everyone knew me as the girl who just kept losing. So senior year came and I ran one last time. I did my very best and I still lost. Not getting choked up here, but I never ultimately won at all. After graduation, I went to Johns Hopkins, still motivated to serve. And this may surprise you, but I put myself out there one last time. And I still lost. I lost that election. I don't remember the vote count, but it was a pretty sizable loss. But this time, when I was eating my feelings in the cafeteria, I sat next to Destiny Bailey, and we all have the Destiny Baileys in our life. Destiny also ran unsuccessfully for student council, and she quickly became my best friend and source of inspiration. And I knew I had a lot to learn from her, and we made a pact to run for SGA together. This time with Destiny as president and me as her senator. And we won. Despite our very low budget campaign, we won. That sixth election was the beginning of a long-term commitment between me and the student body. And during my time, I helped establish new students' traditions on campus. I addressed issues of minority inclusion and worked to reimagine new student orientation. I steadily increased my involvement as well, first as senator, then as vice president and parliamentarian, and then senior year came. Senior year, I ran for executive president of student government, and I assembled a ticket of some of the brightest thinkers on our campus, and we went hard at work. This is a banner that one of my sorority sisters painted for us, and I remember seeing this surprise. It was a surprise thing. I was so nervous because now I was like, the whole school knows I'm running for this, and I know my past failures. What if it happens again? But election day saw us successful. My entire ticket won their elections, and I was sworn in as the first Black female president of the student government at Johns Hopkins. This is a picture from graduation, and no one knew my story back then, but standing in front of my university in that capacity after all those years of trying and being rejected was something I can never put into words. Persistence. It's critical for building up a leader. But persistence and grit is insufficient to fully develop a leader. And the next thread that I began to explore was the role I played in my community. I graduated Hopkins on the heels of the Baltimore riots after the killing of Freddie Gray. It was an intensely emotional time in our city, and I was spurred to work more closely with the community afterwards. I worked on a study, literally door knocking on homes of Baltimore City youth, asking them about their experience living in the city and their narrative of the unrest. And what I learned was of issues of police brutality, definitely, but also of deep-seated public health injustices that deprive people at their chance for equity, about stories about people who are using the emergency room for primary care, people who had to walk miles and miles to get a grocery store that had fresh fruits and vegetables. And in response to this, I was motivated to pursue my Master of Public Health and began my studies at Penn after graduation. Penn took me to Botswana, a country in Southern Africa. And I was excited to return to Africa. I'm originally from West Africa, and I thought it'd be great to go back to the motherland and work. I quickly realized that would be difficult. Though my skin color made me familiar, my lack of knowledge of the social cultures and the mores made me stand out in a negative way. I didn't have the obvious phenotypical signal of an outsider. And so it was hard for people to accept that someone like me, who looked like a Botswana, didn't understand Setswana, and didn't understand the culture. Nevertheless, I was there to work, and I worked on my randomized control trial, which evaluated the use of probiotics for children with diarrheal disease. And we all know in every single culture, children are precious. So as an outsider, my access to those children was even more scrutinized. And it made me aware that in order to make the changes I sought to make, I really needed to be a part of that community. And this community engagement was way more than just working on the farm with my neighbors. It would mean completely integrating myself within the community, something I pledged to do when I returned to the States. So with my refined focus and understanding of the inroads to true community work, I reconnected with my motivation for pursuing my Master's of Public Health, which was to heal communities. And I was inspired by my observations working with children with diarrheal disease, so I recommitted myself to entering medical school. Spoiler alert, I came here. I chose OSU very intentionally because here at OSU, I saw people from all walks of lives leading our university and our community in innovative ways, I was just attracted to the talent here. I saw mentors who were eager to support students. And of course, my family lives 30 minutes away. But I've spoken a lot about what I've gained throughout the years. Um, and I want to talk a little bit about what I've lost and sacrificed as well. Imposter syndrome is something that I've always struggled with since day one. So I can't hear all those nice things Dr. Paz was telling me. Coming into medical school, I've always questioned myself. I mean, I'm surrounded by all you brilliant classmates, and I just never felt like I could measure up. So in the beginning, I buried myself in my books. I didn't meet up with people. I lost touch with friends. I lost important relationships in my life, and I started to feel alienated on campus. It's the ugly part of my journey that I hate to talk about because I was losing a sense of myself and my purpose just to chase a few extra points on an exam. And what helped me combat this imposter syndrome and my isolation, really, was re-engaging in the community. I started to click yes to those emails asking us to volunteer at local Columbus City High School anatomy labs, and re-engaging with the medicine and teaching and looking at things through the high schoolers' eyes really helped open me back up. Their excitement made me excited again. And when I opened myself back up to the parts of life that were outside of the classroom, I began to notice all these opportunities around me. Like my TEDx talk in December, when I shared a story about a particularly difficult and racially charged patient encounter that left me afraid. I talked about how, with the support of my mentors here and my classmates, I was able to process a situation and transform it into a learning opportunity instead of a maladaptive one. This is something I would have never done had I not re-engaged with the community. Another opportunity that became apparent to me after I looked up from my books was the role of a trustee on the University Board of Trustees. So in 2018, I was appointed by Governor Kasich for a 2-year term on the Board of Trustees. See, the university is governed by a group of 20 trustees who are responsible for oversight of academic programs, budgets, and employment of like faculty and staff. So I was sitting in prior studying as usual when the weekly MD2B email came in, and I skimmed it for any interesting research opportunities or talks like I always do. And somewhere buried in the list of summer fellowship opportunities was a call for graduate students to apply for the University Board of Trustees. And from my undergrad student government experience, I was familiar with the role, but I had no idea what was in store for me. So I wrote my essays. I asked Dr. Capers, who's pictured here, for a letter, and I asked one of my undergrad mentors for a reference as well, and I applied. And the initial interviews were done by a campus committee who passed a list of 5 candidates to the governor's office. And sometime later in February, I interviewed downtown at the governor's office. And I sat and waited and hoped I wouldn't be another failure. And later that summer, while I was in Montgomery, Alabama for my Air Force training, without phone or access to literally anything, I was appointed to the board, but I didn't know it. So one evening I was illegally checking my phone, which yikes. But anyway, and I saw a voicemail from the university. It was the secretary of the board calling to tell me the governor's office had tried several times to get a hold of me. And she was wondering if I was still interested in the opportunity. I'm like, duh. So that next morning I marched to my commander's office and I said, sir, like super, I was like, sir, the governor's office is trying to call me tomorrow. May I have permission to please carry my phone? And the rest is history. And during my 2 years on the board, I was privy to things that were confidential, involved in decision-making that spanned all kinds of big and small issues. And I not only learned about things in my wheelhouse of medicine and education, but I also learned things I never considered before, like legal and compliance, finance, personnel matters, and strategy. And when you're on the board, you're never not on the board. You're always wearing that hat, always looking at things through that lens. How is this decision impacting the whole university? A decision is not just made for today, but has impacts for years on the staff, students, and faculty. And that taught me what service was. Service is making decisions in a moment, not for yourself, but for communities in the future, and sometimes for communities of people who were here in the past. And the biggest lesson I learned, though, on the board was how to respectfully disagree or dissent with others. Having my voice being heard in a room full of powerful people who are titans of their industry, the top of the field, like CEOs and lawyers, and, you know, I was just a student and I had to be comfortable enough to let my voice be heard and offer my opinion in a way that was respectful and honest to myself. And when I reflect back over the years, only a handful of people get selected as student trustee. And if I'd given up all the way in the beginning during my many failed high school campaigns, I wouldn't be one of the 6 students in OSU history who've had this opportunity to vote on institutionally shaping decisions. Another way I've lived my call for service is through my commitment to serve in the US Air Force. I often get asked why, so I'm just going to address it. People are like, oh, is it for the medical student, scholarship, or is your family a military family? Well, honestly, the medical school scholarship money is definitely a benefit, and I'm not necessarily from a military family, but I'm from a family that puts a premium on service to the community and to one's country. My parents are originally from Ghana, country in West Africa. And among my father's 7 siblings, he is the only one who didn't join the military or the police service. And my mom similarly comes from a public service and teaching household. And growing up, I heard we have a national service thing in Ghana. And so growing up, I heard stories of them and their national service experiences and how it really helped them get a sense of their community and feel like they were moving their country forward. I know that our immigration to America has afforded me and my family many things. I have dozens of cousins, dozens. And when I sit back and think of all the experiences and the opportunities I've had, it's because of my country code. It's not because of me. So with all its shortcomings, okay, and literally all the criticisms that I will continue to make about America, I am proud to live here. And so I was drawn to commit myself to my own form of national service. For me, I have a 4-year commitment after residency, and I hope to spend it providing orthopedic surgical care to the armed forces service members and to their families. So that brings us back to the beginning. What defines leadership? The thing about medicine is that we graduate medical school and people expect us to be community leaders and have answers on disease, health outcomes, and issues of health equity. But there's no one course in our training that teaches us these skills. And that's on purpose. I know from speaking to a lot of you that there are many ways we augment our curriculum with these critical experiences. And I encourage that, okay? We can never be too busy to volunteer, never be too afraid to take a risk and go for that role, and never, ever, ever be too proud to try again. Because every time we fail, we just learn one way that won't solve our problem. So what defines leadership? I'm teasing it out here. For me, it's persistence, to keep trying no matter how high the hurdles may seem. It's community and the many ways we give back and speak up for the causes we believe in. It's our purpose, which for me is to teach and heal patients and service however we can find it. And if everyone did the same thing, we wouldn't move forward, okay? No one's supposed to also join the Air Force. Well, I mean, you can, but you don't have to. You don't have to be on the board of trustees. We have to follow our unique paths and reflect on how we can use these 4 domains in our lives to move our community forward. And there will be twists and turns in the road. There will be potholes we hit, unexpected flat tires, but we have to keep going. Because many times we'll end up at a destination we never anticipated, but so much better than we could have ever expected. So looking forward to my future, I intend on following this winding path wherever it'll lead me. My only goal right now, in the middle of residency match season, is that I want to be a technically skilled orthopedic surgeon. Other than that, I think my future will be guided by whatever my community asks of me and however I can rise to meet that occasion. I want to thank you all for this opportunity to share my story, and I encourage you to share yours. We all have so much to learn from one another. And as my mom always says, smart people learn from their own experiences, but wise people learn from the experiences of others. Thank you.
Janice, thank you so much for that wonderful presentation, and thank you for your service to our community and as well as to our nation. This presentation is certainly timely given today is election day, and just a reminder to all of our listeners out there that if you have not voted, please do so. Polls are open till 7:30 p.m. today, so please make a plan to get to the polls. The Q&A is now open. We're going to open the floor to questions. So please utilize that function to ask whatever questions you want to ask to Janice at this time. I will pose the first question to you. You're obviously very accomplished, very busy. How do you balance all of your extracurricular responsibilities, being a med student, and with your personal life?
Oh, well, I'm not good at it. I'm getting better. It's one of the things that I had to start figuring out and navigating around the time we were studying for boards, like step 1 exam. There are a lot of things that if you're too passionate, you'll just keep saying yes and keep building things on. I had to learn how to say no. And a lot of times it's holding up, like, I want to graduate medical school and match. Does this thing get me further to that goal, or is it a little bit of a distraction right now? So it's constantly having that reassessment and using a planner, because I have 2 different planners, just to keep myself organized, block out time for myself that like nothing can be scheduled during. And I live with my family, so I don't have to really fit them in. They're always here.
I love what you said about matching up these commitments with your overall mission and what you want to do. Another thing that I think we can definitely take from this talk is that there's no exact recipe, right? This is a winding road and everyone's going to be a little bit different. Um, what what do you say to some of those M1s who are wondering, like, how do they go about with their leadership experiences and their extracurriculars?
It's always a hard question for me to answer, because I feel like whenever I'm talking to anyone else who's, just coming up in medical school, they want a recipe and like a bullet point list, like first you do this and then that and that. But guys, you would have thought I was literally insane if I told you I was running for student government for the 5th time after losing like 4 times. So that's just to say that whatever you're doing, just do it all the way. You don't have to follow anyone else's path, and it doesn't make sense for you to do so either. So however you find happiness, whatever you think your calling is, just exhaust it, because that's how you really become a leader, and that's how you find your own space.
Great. And has your military service changed your perspective at all on service, on world issues, on leadership? And are there any unique lessons that you've learned that civilians might learn from through your service in the military?
Okay, that's a good question. First, I want to explain I am like a 3-year-old military person, but I've been in medical school. So a lot of my exposure has just been through training sessions and a few hospital rotations. I think most importantly, like, I'm joining the military to be a physician, and that's my calling, and that's what I'll be doing. But when I was at military training, they kind of teach you in general how to be an officer. And so the best lesson I learned, I went in there and so despite me doing all these leadership things, I'm someone who 100% likes to be behind the scenes. Like, I'm like the goalkeeper. Like, I want to just be in the net behind the scenes, like doing my thing. And I went to military training and I picked the smallest job. You have to have a job there. I picked the graduation officer, which my job was just to get the invitations for graduation. I wasn't going to be in front of anything. I wasn't reporting to anyone. I was just doing my own business. And within 2 weeks of being there, the commander called me to his office, and I didn't tell anyone anything about me. And he was like, yeah, you're going to be flight officer in charge. And I was like, no, I'm really happy being graduation officer. I'm doing a great job. And he was like, no, this is what you're going to do instead. So I think the best lesson I learned from the military and something applicable for civilian life is that there's something about each of us that's so unique that no matter where you go and whatever situation you put yourself in, like you'll shine out. You can't hide it. You can't fight it. And who I was in my civilian life came out in my military service time. And I don't know, I just had to embrace it, and I didn't love it, but I did it.
I love that. Going to some of the questions that we're getting from some of the viewers, what is some of the best and worst advice that you have ever received?
Oh, I don't, okay, the best advice I've ever received, let's start there. Best advice I've ever received is, oh no, this is like what you can't do during residency interviews. Oh, okay. The best advice I've ever received has to be to live your, this is so cheesy though, but it's like to live your life like it's like the dance, what's that thing? Like dance when like no one's watching, like because I'm someone who's just I'm so hyper aware that everyone's watching me, even if no one's watching me. And I take things way too personal. And like I said, I thought everyone knew me as a girl who kept losing. But the best advice, my mom, she was just like, just go for it. Like no one, just live like no one's, dance like no one's watching. I'm really bad at sayings, but it's that one. Dance like no one's watching and just live your life to the fullest. As far as worst advice, I am a compartmentalist extraordinaire. And if anyone has ever given me advice that has not worked out, it's like way out of my mind because it didn't help me. So I don't have worst advice. I guess the worst advice would be to not vote.
Mhm.
Your vote
I love
doesn't, that's bad advice.
That's great, especially for today. Um, how do you recommend finding like networking with mentors for service opportunities, leadership opportunities, or anything else that anyone could be interested in?
Yes, great question. So because I learned how to be a failure really early, I stopped taking it. The more you fail, the less you take it personally. So that's great. And because of that, I would send cold emails to like everyone. Like actually I cold emailed Dr. Paz and I was like, hey, just wondering if you have time for like a coffee and to catch up. No agenda. I just wanted to like learn about his life. And I did. And he was so gracious to sit down with me. But when I was finding research, I probably emailed 75-ish people, just like, this is what I'm interested in. Can I work with you? And a lot of times I don't get any responses. A lot of times it's like, no, I'm full. But then it just takes that one mentor or that one person who becomes a mentor and opens themselves up. So I say, don't be afraid to apply for everything. Well, that matches your goals and take the risk because no one needs to know if you don't get something, but you've put yourself out there and exposed yourself to the opportunity.
Great. And as a woman of color, how do you navigate bias and the pressures and responsibilities that come with being one of the only few to represent?
That's a timely question as well. Here's a quote I really like. I don't know who said it, clearly someone of color, but she said, it's okay to be the first, but it's not okay to be the last. I'm not the first. There's some things I've been the first for, but I'm not the first. I look at orthopedic surgery, and though there's less than 100 Black women in orthopedic surgery, there are Black women in orthopedic surgery, and I reach out to them cold emails like I've been doing, and I do get responses. And find whoever is close to you and just ask for their help. People are really willing to help others. So I think I've been the beneficiary of just such strong mentorship throughout my life, people who looked like me and people who didn't look like me alike. And I'm hoping to also be able to play that role for someone else. So when I think back, it's been challenging. There's sometimes you're in a room and you're hyper aware that you're the only one in there that thinks the way you do and that has the same concerns that you have, but that means you should speak louder because that means your voice is 100% needed in that room.
It's great. What was your best experience that you've had so far at the College of Medicine?
I really enjoyed a lot of my time. That's okay to pick. I know this isn't something that do people even go to class anymore? I'm not sure. But back when I was growing up, we some of us went to lectures, and one of my very favorite things was sitting in somewhere in the middle of the lecture hall with Rana, who's one of my close medical school friends, and we would always end up dressing alike by mistake, even though we don't live together. And I would just do lecture with her, and I just enjoyed it. It's like a social studying time where I got to listen to these things and sit next to a really close friend of mine. So little things like that.
I can definitely relate to that, being one of the few lecture goers along with you during our preclinical years. Another question we have in here is, being a leader implies that you have people that follow your lead. How do you work with people that may be unmotivated or uninterested in the project or the task at hand? And what advice do you have for leading in these difficult situations?
Yeah, my answer for that is that's what's hard about being a leader. And that's something, I'm going to get a little political, but that's something that we haven't had a great example of in the past 4 years. You are not a leader because of your title and because you say you're a leader. Your job as a leader is to help other people achieve their goals and to help them unlock their potential and help them reach whatever level it is that they want to reach. So when I'm working on a team and I see that someone's unmotivated, my question is, how can I make them care? How can I make them buy into what's happening? Is it that the mission is so off base that, just because I think it's important doesn't mean that it's important. I'm on a quality improvement team right now, and I'm I have like the smartest people in the whole school of my, well, everyone's really smart, but I think I have the smartest people in my whole school in my group, and I'm the quote unquote leader, and I'm always thinking like, how can I make sure that they're as excited as I am about this? And that's finding out what's their particular interests and seeing how we can adjust the mission to fit that. Because if you say it's a destination, no one else is on board to travel with you, you're not going anywhere.
What is something that has challenged you during your medical school career so far?
I'm only hesitating because obviously you don't want to share the super sad things in your life, but I guess I'll be vulnerable here. During medical school, I lost a very important relationship in my life. So, like a partner I thought I was going to spend forever with. And it was at a difficult time where I was going through studying for step one, and which is a very important board for us, and trying to balance my leadership roles and this relationship. And all of that overcommitment, which is when I had to start learning how to say no, all of that overcommitment meant that some things in my life were being dropped. And I think that was the most challenging time of medical school for me, but it also helped me understand the importance of prioritizing wellness and prioritizing the absolutely important things like school and family. And, so that inspired my journey to be a more balanced Janice.
Now, one final question now that we've gotten through all the questions so far. What is your final takeaway message for all of our viewers out there? Just final takeaways.
My final takeaway is that wherever you are right now, that's your revolution. Like, there is no small thing that you're doing in your life. You're not just a medical student. You're not just vice president of student council. Everywhere that we are in, every role that we're in, that's supposed to be our revolution. And you don't have to keep waiting for this title or like this next thing. So kind of the shine where you are and really make the most of what you're doing now.
That's wonderful. And thank you so much, Janice, for giving this knowledge, for presenting and being vulnerable, and being able to inspire all of our viewers out there. So thank you so much for taking this opportunity I do want to remind all of our viewers that today is election day. Please go vote. Thank you for joining us today. A reminder that our next medical student grand rounds will be on November 17th, where we'll have Brian Hansen presenting on his dissertation research in cardiac arrhythmias. Hope to see you all there. Thank you all so much for joining us today.